media in those cases, especially where there is no compendial description for the testing, for example, for the microbiological performance testing of diluents. The revised draft of the United States Pharmacopoeia USP Chapter 1117, Microbiological Best Laboratory Practice, gives a reference to ISO 11133. And it has been published in the Pharmacopoeia Forum by end of last year, beginning of this year. Does ISO 11133 also cover culture media in other formats? For example, culture media in bags or convenient ready-to-use media, RTUs. The current version of ISO 11133 does not describe all possible formats of culture media. For other formats, for example, culture media in bags or convenient ready-to-use media like MC Media Pad or other media on filters or on other units, the performance testing has to be adopted in accordance with their usage in real life in the laboratory. For liquid culture media filled in bags, the same volume is used as for media prepared from dehydrated media, for example, 10 milliliter in a tube of buffered peptone water for each test train. For convenient ready-to-use media, the same volume is used for the inoculum as used for the test, for example, 1 milliliter for each MC Media Pad. ISO 11133 defines a batch or a lot of culture media in the following way. It is a homogeneous and fully traceable unit of a medium, referring to a defined amount of bulk, semi-finished product or end product, which is consistent in type and quality and which has been produced within one defined production period, having been assigned the same batch or lot number. ISO 11133 requires, before use, the performance of each batch of culture media shall be tested according to the media category described. Each batch of ready-to-use media, the user might not need to carry out extensive testing on media supplied with QC certificate, but shall ensure that storage conditions are maintained as recommended by the manufacturers. The user shall ensure that manufacturers of commercially available ready-to-use media have a quality program in place for this range of product. The user shall ensure that the issued quality control certificate meets the requirements of ISO 11133, specifying the expected and obtained results. Periodic checks shall be carried out in order to demonstrate that the quality of media has been maintained during the transport. The user laboratory shall also check documentary evidence to ensure that the manufacturer's acceptance criteria for performance testing satisfy their own internal requirements. ISO 11133 requires, before use, the batch of each medium prepared from commercially available dehydrated formulations. For enumeration media, a quantitative testing shall be performed, and for other media, a qualitative testing may be sufficient. And for each batch of media prepared from basic individual components, in addition to the requirements stated for media prepared from from dehydrated formulations as given here, quantitative testing shall be performed in order to monitor trends in quality of basic materials, productivity of the medium, and in-house laboratory production protocols are required. Generally, a batch of culture media performs satisfactorily if all the test microorganisms used perform according to the given specifications, and it shall be accepted if both general and microbiological quality criteria are met. Very often asked question is it mandatory to test every autoclave run? How much testing is needed? ISO 11133 requires a performance testing on every batch, but does not require that every autoclave run is a batch. It might be possible to reduce the performance testing if the quality assurance of the whole process is well ensured, and if the laboratory's documentation specifies the preparation as an autoclave run or an autoclave cycle, for example, and not using, in this case, the word batch. A prerequisite of such a reduction is the documentation from the manufacturer by a quality control certificate showing test organisms used and results of performance testing with criteria of acceptance following strictly the specifications given in the respective ISO standards. And additionally, if the manufacturer is ISO 17025 accredited by an accreditation authority as a registered test laboratory for the performance testing of media for microbiology according to the actual version of ISO 11033, it might be also helpful reducing own incoming quality control. Under these circumstances, the performance testing might be reduced to a full and comprehensive performance testing for every new batch of dehydrated medium, for example, in quantitative microbiological testing, and a reduced performance testing for all subsequent prepared autoclave runs from this batch. For example, testing of pH and a qualitative testing with one typical positive strains. It is very important to note that the required amount of performance testing depends, of course, on the requirements of the local regulatory bodies, which may vary from country to country, from accreditation body to body, and from area to area. ISO 11133 requires also a documentation for manufacturers or producers, including name of the medium, individual components, and any supplements, and if possible, their product codes. Technical data sheets, including formulation, intended use, filling quantity, if applicable, and reference. Safety and or hazard data where needed, batch number, target pH of the complete medium, storage information, and expiry date. An assigned shelf life, a quality control certificate showing test organisms used, and results of the performance testing with the criteria of acceptance. This information shall be available from the manufacturer. What is an example of such a documentation? For example, from our company, we give a full certificate of analysis, including the DAX accreditation authority on our ISO 17025 accredited labs. You will have full information on composition, preparation, application, storage, and of course, specifications for the microbiological and physical testing, including pH, and the actual data from the batch. Besides this, we are providing a technical data sheet with all the description of the media, but also with a full comparison of the formulation as specified by the standard, like ISO standard, and what we have in the declaration of our media. And of course, you have a full safety data sheet of the medium, culture medium in different languages also. ISO 11133 requires for each batch of product, ingredient, or culture media to check the following when the incoming delivery acceptance of product: identification of the product, integrity of packaging, expiry date of the product, documentation supplied, number of units received, and to record the date of receipt. When a new container of medium or reagent is opened, check the seal if a seal is there, record date of first opening, and visually assess the content of open containers. When a bottle of dehydrated medium is opened, date the container and indicate a maximum storage time. How to indicate the maximum storage time of the open container with dehydrated culture medium? Of course, this depends on the storage conditions. For example, the storage time of an open bottle might be shorter in a room with high humidity. From personal experience, for most dehydrated culture media, it might be up to 6 months after first opening. It depends on the storage conditions and on the formulation of the culture medium. Some culture media are more hygroscopic than others. In every case, the content of the open container shall be visually assessed before usage. Loss of dehydrated media is shown by change in flow characteristics of the product, homogeneity, caking, color changes, and others. Any dehydrated medium that has absorbed moisture or shows obvious changes in physical appearance shall be discarded. ISO 11133 itself gives no maximum storage time for open bottles. Coming now to the important part of the laboratory preparation of media. When media are prepared from dehydrated commercial formulations, follow the manufacturer's instructions precisely. Document all relevant data, for example, code, lot number, mass volume, pH, date of preparation, sterilization, and operator. For the documentation, ISO 11133 gives an example of a record card in Annex D, which may be taken over from the user lab, or it's also possible to modify it to your requirements. ISO 11133 requires then use only purified water for the preparation of media, like distilled, demineralized, deionized, or produced by reverse osmosis, or of equivalent quality, free from substances like to inhibit or to influence the growth of the microorganisms under the test conditions, for example, free of traces of chlorine, traces of ammonium, and traces of metal ions. The water can be stored, but it is, however, recommended that the water is used as soon as produced. Microbial contamination should not exceed 1,000 colony-forming units, CFU per milliliter, and should be preferable below 100 CFU per milliliter. Microbial contamination should be regularly monitored according, for example, to ISO 6222, water quality enumeration of culturable microorganisms, colony count by inoculation in a nutrient-agar culture medium, with an incubation at 22 degrees for 68 plus minus 4 hours, but also other equivalent methods can be used. The conductivity of the water used in the laboratory shall be no more than 25 microsiemens per centimeter and preferable below 5 microsiemens per centimeter. The conductivity of the water should be checked before use. Is it possible to use other methods than ISO 6222 for the microbiological examination of the water? Yes, it is possible to use an equivalent method, for example, national methods for the enumeration of the colony count. Which frequency of testing is required according ISO 11133? The standard gives no frequency for the microbiological testing. From personal experience, it is recommended to state the frequency according to the frequency of preparation of the culture media. For example, a weekly testing case that every day culture media are prepared, and a monthly testing for a lab with more rare preparation. Are there water systems available producing the required quality of the water? Yes. For example, also the new Millicu-Helix Advantage system, which delivers water quality that exceeds already the requirements of culture media for the preparation of culture media. ISO 11133 requires the measurement of pH using a pH meter. Adjust the pH before sterilization if necessary, so that after sterilization and cooling to 25 degrees, the medium is at the required pH plus minus 0.2 pH units unless otherwise stated. The adjustment is normally carried out using a sodium hydroxide solution or a hydrochloric acid solution. If adjustment is performed after sterilization, these have to be used in sterile solution. ISO 11133 notes that pH adjustment before autoclaving are usually not necessary if provided good quality distilled or deionized water is used. For more information on pH meter, see ISO 7218, the general requirements and guidance for microbiological examinations. Is it possible to use pH indicator strips? No. ISO 111 requires the usage of a pH meter. What is the best way to adjust the pH after autoclaving? If required, take aseptically a small portion of the sterilized medium and fill it in a small container. Cool this portion down to 25 degrees, whilst the rest of the medium is held on 47 to 50 degrees. After the small portion has reached around 25 degrees, measure the pH using a pH sensor suitable for culture media by stepping in the medium. If needed, add to the molten medium a sterile solution to adjust the pH, and it is advisable to add only small amounts, dispense well, and then repeat the pH measuring as described before. Why is pH adjustment before autoclaving are usually not necessary? Commercially available dehydrated media are usually produced in a way that they reach the required pH after autoclaving, if provided good quality distilled or deionized water is used. Adding sodium hydroxide or hydrochloric acid before autoclaving can cause the formation of precipitates in the medium during the autoclaving process. For storage and shelf life of prepared medium, the standard ISO 111 requires for commercial supplied media to follow the manufacturer's instructions. For laboratory prepared media, store the media under conditions which prevent any modification of their composition, namely protected from light and desiccation. If not used immediately, store in a refrigerator at 5 ±3 degrees. General recommendation is given by the standard 2 to 4 weeks for plates and 3 to 6 months for media in sealed bottles and tubes. Unless otherwise specified in specific standards or results of the laboratory shelf life evaluation indicate a longer shelf life or a shorter shelf life. Most specific standards give now an indication for the shelf life. The shelf life evaluation itself, it shall be established by checking media after defined storage time for their physical, chemical, and microbiological performance characteristics. The frequency of this verification of the shelf life of self-prepared media shall be specified by the laboratory. Does ISO 11133 give a frequency? No, they give no frequency as said before. For example, the frequency should be once a year for frequently used prepared media, culture media, and every second year for those prepared more rarely. This is a personal recommendation. A re-verification of the shelf life may be considered when changing the media supplier of the dehydrated media you are using for your self-prepared media. Does ISO standard gives information about the shelf life of specific self-prepared media? Yes, the most recent published specific standards in food and water microbiology give an indication, for example, for the buffered peptone water, up to 6 months in closed containers, for plates like XLD agar up to 4 weeks, or for VRBG agar, violet by glucose agar up to 2 weeks, and for chromogenic coliform agar used in water microbiology for checking on E. coli and coliform bacteria, at least 1 month, always protected from drying or against evaporation. ISO 11133 requires for the preparation for use the melting of agar of the culture media. To melt the culture medium by placing it in a boiled water bath or place it in steam flow through autoclave. Media that have previously been autoclaved should be reheated for minimum time to avoid overheating, and remove them when they have been melted. Cool the medium to 47 to 50 degrees in a thermostatically controlled water bath, and molten medium should be used as soon as possible, but it is recommended that it should not be retained for more than 4 hours at 47 to 50 degrees. Unused medium shall not be resolidified and reused. Media used in pour plate method, to which have been intended to be added to the sample, are tempered to 44 to 47 degrees using a water bath set at this temperature. It is mandatory to establish and document an agar tempering regime by using a thermometer in an agar in a separate container similar to that used to the test media. Is it possible to use a microwave for melting the agar? ISO 11133 does not describe the usage of a microwave oven, but ISO 7218 describes the usage of a microwave oven to melt culture media. It gives a warning not to heat the media with heat label components unless it has been verified that this way of heating has no effect on medium performance. When melting agar media, a lower power setting, for example, the defrost cycle should be used, and the medium should be placed in a water heat sink. This is recommended to aid the control of the process. For the verification, suitable heating times and power settings shall be established at initial commissioning for the different volumes of liquids and culture media routinely handled to ensure optimum performance and avoid overheating of sensitive products. Is it possible to remelt unused medium? ISO 11133 states that unused medium shall not be resolidified and reused. When this is needed, it should be verified by the user that this has no effect on the performance of the specific medium. For the physical and chemical quality control, fill volume and thickness, appearance, color and homogeneity, gel consistency, moisture content, and pH have to be controlled. For the microbial contamination, an appropriate quantity, depending on the size of the batch, shall be tested by incubation under appropriate conditions. At least one plate or tube for small batches below 100 units. And for larger batches, producers shall draw up specifications, for example, based on media components, process parameters and limits, and type of packaging using appropriate acceptable quality limits. Acceptance criteria shall be established and justified for each medium by the manufacturer or laboratory itself. Coming now to the test organisms for performance testing. All ISO standards are now using the so-called WDCM test strains numbering system. These test organisms are now those from a catalog of universal strain identifiers, which are compiled by the World Data Center for Microorganisms, WDCM. This catalog contains details of the reference strain represented for each WDCM number and contact dates for the culture collections, and it has a very good and informative website. For example, Escherichia coli WDCM 00012 is given as a numbering system in the ISO standard, and behind that we have the culture collection numbers for the reference strains for many different culture collections, and where applicable strains used in the European Pharmacopoeia have been taken into account, like here for the Escherichia coli. ISO 11133 gives the methods how to test the culture media, and the specific standards give the details of the performance testing, like incubation control strains and so on. Where more than one strain is listed for each aspect of the performance testing, productivity, selectivity, specificity, The minimum strains to be used have been indicated by the letter B. This letter B sometimes is very small in the standard, but it is given, and it is very important because these strains are the minimum to be tested. For example, for the ISO 21528 for enumeration of Enterobacteriaceae, the definition of selectivity and productivity is specified in ISO 11133 and described. The general procedures. But the standard for Enterobacteriaceae itself gives then the test strains and the test criteria. Commercial and non-commercial suppliers are expected to use additional strains, like those given additionally in this kind of tables, to ensure the quality of the culture media they supply. Is it possible to use own isolates for the culture media testing according 11133 ISO? ISO 11133 and the specific standards give a panel of specific defined strains selected for testing in order to ensure consistency between laboratories and to facilitate the demonstration of differences between media batch to batch variations between manufacturers. These strains have been fully evaluated to ensure their suitability and consistency for performance testing. Additional strain can be used, of course. In case of testing with salmonella strains, some national restrictions and directions may require the use of a different serovar. This possibility is given by ISO 11133. The preservation, maintenance, and preparation of the test organisms is very detailed described in ISO 11133. So for laboratory prepared reference stock, the number of transfers should be documented to prevent excessive subculturing that increases the risk of phenotypic alteration. Examples for the preparations are given in detail for stock cultures, working cultures, suspensions, in a detailed written description, but also in a kind of flow charts. Preparation of the working cultures is detailed described in the standard by using an overnight culture. Other techniques can also be used. Preparation of the suspensions of the inocula for the usage is very, very important. And for that, a serial dilution is suitable diluent like quarter strength ringer solution, peptone salt solution is prepared. And then the most suitable dilution step for the desired number of organisms is used in a specific volume. The suitable dilution to test as a test inoculum should be determined from previous tests conducted under strictly standardized conditions for all steps. By preparing these dilutions and plating them out. These suspensions can also be held 2 hours at room temperature or to be used with after storage within 24 hours if stored at 5 ± 3 degrees. Frozen inocula can also be used if it has been shown that the microorganisms can survive for the chosen period. The microbiological quality control is given in details in the ISO 11133 for the performance testing. Examples for quantitative and qualitative testing for solid and liquid media are described. When culture media are intended for quantitative purpose, quantitative testing methods shall be performed. Surface or port plate technique may be used as for the normal usage of the medium. Incubate the inoculated medium in accordance with the relevant international standard. Solid media used with membranes have to be tested in combinations with membrane filters using membrane filtration procedure. And the testing frequency shall be justified by the end user, taking into account the extent of preparation in the end user's laboratory and the level of quality assurance in place in the laboratory. So the method for quantitative testing for this specified productivity has to be reached, which is determined by using the total count of colonies and from the test medium and compared to the total count of colonies obtained from the reference medium. For this, of course, a quantified bacterial suspension have to be used, and the recovery of the new batch of the medium will be compared with the recovery from a non-selective medium by simple division. Total number of colonies to be counted on the reference medium should be around 100 CFU from one or more plates. Why a total number of colonies of around 100 CFU have to be counted on the reference medium? For the quantitative enumeration test, a level of approximately 100 CFU is necessary to achieve sufficient precision. For this, one or more plates may be needed. More than one plate may be needed, especially for bacteria which form big colonies. A practicable range of 80 to 120 CFU per plate with a minimum number of 50 plates, 50 CFU per plate should be used. The use of more than one plate will increase the precision. And for membrane filters, the same number of CFU is needed using one or more filters. Why solid media used with membrane filters have to be tested using membrane filtration? The culture media used with quality of the membrane filter shall be tested together to demonstrate the suitability of the whole system, like a microbiological function test. Many membrane filter culture media comparison studies which have been reported in the literature show differences in their ability to recover bacteria from water samples. Details will be given in the currently under revision ISO 7704 requirements for the performance testing of membrane filters. Methods for the performance testing of the culture media are given, and also for the reference media. Methods for quantitative and qualitative testing for solid and liquid media, diluents and transport media are given in details in the ISO 11133, always in this kind of format. You have the medium, you have the microorganisms to be used, in mandatory, and you have the productivity for the quantitative testing as a criteria. For example, for the reference media, you have to reach a productivity of 0.7 compared the new batch of the media with a previous batch already validated. The performance testing of liquid selective media are tested, for example, with a mixture from target and non-target strains in one tube and a separate tube for the non-target strains. As an example here for the half phraser, you have one tube where you inoculate with Listeria monocytogenes as a target microorganisms, E. coli and E. faecalis with non-target microorganisms, all in one tube of half phraser. After incubation, you streak this one tube on the selective medium Agar Listeria according to Ottaviani and Agosti. Only Listeria monocytogenes will grow and has to form more than 10 colonies. For selectivity, you are using two additional separate tubes of half phraser, one for Escherichia coli of our non-target microorganism and one for Escherichia Enterococcus faecalis of another non-target organisms. Both will be plated out on tryptic soy agar, a non-selective medium, to show that they are suppressed in their growth in the half phraser. So they have to show a total inhibition for Escherichia coli and a reduced growth for Enterococcus faecalis. So we also have a lot of questions and on training in Merck for all these methods and details in the ISO 11133. It was only possible to give an overview now in this webinar. We are offering also trainings, 1 day on-site or virtual training and consulting activity to become familiar with the theory. And also we are offering an on-site training on consultancy activity in theory and practice, not by the moment, of course, with the COVID-19 situation, but hopefully next year again. So, and with this, I would like to thank you for attending to the webinar and opening for questions. And if you are looking for further information, you can find a lot of information on our Sigma Aldrich website, sigmaaldrich.com for food.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for this insightful and wonderful presentation. The floor is open now for questions and answers. The participants can please post in their questions. We already have a few questions here. The first one is coming from Festus Olajubu, and he's saying good presentation so far. Do you prepare culture media for clinical samples too? Can we enjoy similar webinar on this too? Barbara, did you get that question?
Yes, I have a question in front of me and heard it. Thank you very much for this question. Yes, currently we have still some culture media for clinical samples, but we will think about a similar webinar on this, but by the moment we don't have such a webinar because we are mostly focused on culture media for food, water testing, and pharmaceutical purpose at the moment.
Thank you very much. The next one is from Bala Miyaki, and the question says, when a culture media is expired, does that mean it cannot support the growth of microorganisms, or can it be validated and used?
Thank you very much for this important question. I think you are speaking about a culture medium in a dehydrated formulation. Normally, from my personal experience, expiring date is expiring date, but most medium, if they are stored correctly, and especially if the box was not opened, it can be used also later, but it should be done full control on the laboratory before using it to take ensure that your sample can will be provided and can be checked with these culture media. So I strongly recommend in the case you have to use the culture media after its expiring date to do a verification with a full panel of microorganisms. Yes.
Thank you, Barbara. Aka Fortune is asking, she's saying, good day, please, what is the difference between quantitative and qualitative testing of culture media?
Thank you very much for this question also. A quantitative testing needs to count the microorganism, and to count you have to know what you have been put on the plate or in the medium. For that you need an inoculum which you are checking on a reference plate. So then you have two numbers, one from the reference plate and one from your test medium, and this is compared, and then you get a productivity ratio. So a number of recovery. For qualitative testing, you streak only and see if growth is sufficient. But you're not counting in this case.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Fatima says, what is the meaning of RTUs and BPW? Thank you for this educative presentation.
Thank you. Sorry, RTU is a ready-to-use media for plates, for tubes, but also media in a format like MC Media Pad, which is a medium on a folio where you can inoculate direct with your sample. So RTU is ready-to-use media. And BPW is buffered peptone water, which is used for enrichment of salmonella, for example, according to ISO.
Okay. Iyintoluwa Bakari says, please, how can I get the half Fraser agar?
So half Fraser is only a broth for selective enrichment for listeria, and it's offered by many media suppliers, but also for Merck, and we are testing it under ISO 17025 accreditation. I'm sure that my colleagues in your area can help you for this.
Yes, and that's why they have us here. She can talk to me later after the presentation.
Yes.
All right. Peter Oladosu says, thank you for your presentation. We are used to ATCC. Can we get to register for WDCM cultures?
WDCM cultures represents the national cultures from different countries, including ATCC, but also German National Culture Collection. Please go on the website, which is given in our presentation, and then you can find all the national culture collections which have these WDCM cultures. So WDCM is only a number representing a lot of national culture collections, including ATCC, of course.
Okay. The next question is from Oluyemi Olubade. Says, please, can you shed more light on reference culture medium?
A reference culture medium is, for example, tryptic soy agar, which you are using as a reference for counting the inoculum, which you also inoculated in your test medium. Then you will, or on your test medium plate, then you will have the count on the reference culture medium, like tryptic soy agar, and on the plate under test, and you will compare both counts to calculate the productivity.
Okay, I believe the questionnaire has gotten that answer. Olufumilola Okpekpe says, thanks for the presentation. How long can a Petri dish containing culture medium stay in the fridge before discarding?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. It is depending a lot on the nature of the culture medium. We have some culture media which have a very short expiry day life, storage time in, but you can also have some media which have a long shelf life. Look to the ISO method itself, and general ISO 11133 gives a recommendation of 2 to 4 weeks. But it depends. As I said, in some ISO standards like Salmonella, we have now a direct recommendation. And of course, it needs mostly a verification by your own lab to do a shelf life, for example, once a year on your dedicated media used in your laboratory.
Okay, I think she's throwing more light on the question. She's saying, I mean, in a situation where you cannot use it for swab on the same day.
Yes, in this case, it really depends on the medium. So some media really have a good shelf life for more than 1 day. But it really depends. Do you have a special medium in mind? Most media can be stored a longer time.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Barbara. Moses Unjoku, this is the last one, says, how can we get support for migrating to the standards?
First is that you have the standard in your hand. This is the first thing. You can buy it from your national standardization body, I think, but also from International ISO Web Store. And then to get familiar with the standard, then of course we provide this kind of webinar, but we have also white papers on this standard. And of course, if you have a very special question, I'm sure you can ask this to our national colleagues and they will provide it to me. So we can be in constant contact, of course.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I think one question just came in. We
Yes.
quickly take that while we wrap up. This is from Olatomi Funke. It says, apart from inhibited growth of microbes, what other effect can pH have on a medium?
Yes, of course, inhibited growth of microbes, but also loss on selectivity. So too much growth of unwanted microbes could be if you have a wrong pH. Then, of course, you can have precipitations in the medium itself if you have the wrong pH. And especially if you have a medium where the change of pH is a biochemical indicator, like a lot of biochemical culture media for confirmation, then you may have a wrong change of pH and a wrong result of your lab investigation from your samples, from your isolates.
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara. I think that's the much we can take. Dr. Bukola, I would hand over to you now. For those who still have more questions, you can send your questions.
One more question.
Yeah.
Maybe
okay, one more question. Okay, that's from Musa Gasali.
Yes.
He says, can you please shed light on the best way to dispose these microbial wastes?
So the answer for this is given in ISO 7218, General Requirements and Guidelines for the laboratory work in the food laboratory. And of course, it is depending on your national requirements. Often 134 degrees is used for 20 minutes, but sometimes also other temperatures. So it depends a lot on your national requirements for this. And in ISO 7218, there are also guidelines given according to WHO for the waste of the different microbial wastes from the different risks levels. It depends also on the risk levels. If you have risk level 3, for example, for tuberculosis, then you have other regulations for the disposal than on risk level 1, of course.
Thank you very much. To the participants, for those who still have questions, feel free to post your questions. Even after the webinar, we'll try and answer those questions to Dr. Olubukola to continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that presentation, and thank you for all the clarifications on the questions. Like Stanley said, please participants, if you still have more questions, please post to the website, and we'll try as much as possible through Barbara to answer all the questions. Thank you so much. And remember that certificate of attendance will be forwarded to you. The presentation slides will not be made available, but you get the certificate of attendance, and there's a link already that will be sent to you and will be found on our website, www.bloompublichealth.com. You'll find the recorded webinar there, and you get more information. Thank you very much, Barbara. We're very grateful. Thank you, and for all the
participants. Stay all healthy. Thanks to all participants, and thanks for organizing, and thanks for all the questions. Thank you.
And thank you for asking all of them. We're very grateful, and we know that we have so much to take home today. Science is interrelated, and it's all about good laboratory practice, and it's all about making our laboratories more efficient, in all the practices of good laboratory. So thank you for your attention. Another 2 weeks, we'll be here again. Please, if we have the feedback form available, please, we can post it now. Or if it's not available, then we can send it, we can find it on the website, and then we can fill it and send it to us. This is also very important for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. So on behalf of Bloom Public Health and Merck Life Sciences, we're saying thank you for allowing us into your space. And we are here together because we're on a journey. So we'll reach there, we get there together. Laboratory efficiency is a watchword. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.